Welcome to Healthy Kidneys After 60. I am your host, Jane Pauley. They say that as we cross the threshold of 60, the nights start to feel longer. Not because we are resting more, but because sleep becomes a puzzle we can no longer solve. We find ourselves staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m., wondering where that effortless rest of our youth went. Today, we are joined by a man who has dedicated his life to understanding the intricate clockwork of the human body and brain, the chief medical correspondent for CNN, and a renowned neurosurgeon at Grady Memorial Hospital, Dr. Sanjay Gupta. Dr. Gupta, it is an absolute honor to have you here to help us navigate these quiet, often difficult hours of the night.
Thank you so much for having me, Jane. It is a pleasure to be here with you and your listeners. In my years of practice and in my time at the hospital, I have realized that for many of us, especially as we age, sleep is no longer a given. It becomes a skill or perhaps a ritual that we have forgotten how to perform. We focus so much on what we do during the day, but we often neglect the transition into the night. I am truly looking forward to sharing some simple science-backed shifts that can transform those restless hours into a time of deep, restorative healing for the body and the mind.
Dr. Gupta, I want to start with something that I hear from so many of our friends and listeners who are in their 60s, 70s, and even 80s. There seems to be this quiet, almost accepted resignation that aging simply means losing the ability to sleep well. We see our Japanese counterparts often maintaining this incredible vitality and deep rest well into their late years. Yet here in America, so many of us are reaching for a pill bottle or just tossing and turning until the sun comes up. Is there truly a secret to how they manage to keep their internal clocks so steady? And why does it feel like our bodies suddenly forget how to switch off the moment we hit a certain age? Is it an inevitable part of the biological clock, or are we perhaps missing a fundamental step in how we prepare our nervous system for the dark?
That is such a profound way to look at it, Jane, because you are touching on the difference between falling asleep and transitioning into sleep. In my clinical experience and through the many conversations I have had with experts globally, the secret often lies not in a magic supplement, but in the 60 seconds right before you turn off the light. We live in a world that is constantly on, and for many people over 60, the brain stays in a state of high alert, what we call sympathetic dominance. The Japanese tradition, and what science is now confirming, emphasizes the need to consciously downshift the nervous system. When we talk about people in places like Okinawa or rural Japan, they often have these very subtle rituals of movement and breath that signal to the brain that the threat of the day is over. It is about moving from that fight or flight mode into the rest and digest mode, which is governed by the parasympathetic nervous system and the vagus nerve. If you do not give your heart and your brain those 60 seconds to realize they are safe, you are basically trying to park a car while the engine is still revving at 5,000 RPMs. It is not that we lose the ability to sleep as we age. It is that our systems become more sensitive to the friction of a stressful day, and we need a more intentional way to smooth that transition out.
It is fascinating that you mentioned the engine revving, because that is exactly how it feels when you are lying there and your heart is beating just a little too fast for a person who is supposed to be resting. Many of our listeners describe this feeling of tired but wired, where their bones are heavy, but their minds are racing with worries about family, health, or even just the tasks of tomorrow. You mentioned that there is a way to downshift using something as simple as our breath to influence that vagus nerve you spoke about. Could you explain how someone sitting in their bed right now, feeling that tension in their chest, can actually use a specific rhythm of breathing to force their body to calm down? Is there a tangible way to quiet that internal noise without needing anything other than our own lungs?
Absolutely, and this is where the science becomes very beautiful and very practical. One of the most effective tools we have is controlled slow breathing, specifically focusing on making the exhale longer than the inhale. When you breathe in, you slightly increase your heart rate, but when you breathe out slowly, you stimulate the vagus nerve, which sends a direct chemical signal to your heart to slow down and to your brain to lower its arousal levels. I often recommend a simple 4 to 6 rhythm. You breathe in through your nose for a count of 4, and then you exhale very slowly through your mouth as if you are blowing through a straw for a count of 6. Research has shown that maintaining a breath rate of about 6 breaths per minute can optimize your oxygen saturation and significantly increase heart rate variability, which is a hallmark of a relaxed, resilient nervous system. It is like a physical off switch. Instead of lying there fighting the thoughts, you focus entirely on the sensation of that long, cool exhale. You are essentially telling your physiology, we are safe, the day is done, and it is okay to let go. This is what I call the gratitude position, or the introductory phase of the night. It is the most basic, yet most overlooked 60-second ritual that can determine whether the next 8 hours will be a struggle or a sanctuary.
That off switch sounds like exactly what we are all searching for, but I know there is a fear among many seniors that if they do not see results immediately, they have failed. There is this haunting anxiety that if tonight is not perfect, then tomorrow will be a disaster. How do we break that cycle of fear of not sleeping that seems to plague so many people once they pass 60?
That fear is perhaps the biggest thief of sleep we have. We have to stop treating sleep like a task we have to succeed at and start treating it like a gift we allow ourselves to receive. If you lie down and your head is still spinning, the worst thing you can do is get angry at yourself. Instead, use that breath we talked about and recognize that even if you aren't unconscious yet, by breathing slowly and lying in a supportive position, your body is still resting, your heart is still recovering, and your brain is starting to clear out the day's clutter. We have to be gentle with ourselves. Tonight, I want everyone to try this. As you settle into your bed, don't worry about falling asleep. Just focus on that 60-second downshift. If you do that, you have already won half the battle because you have stopped the stress response from colonizing your night.
Dr. Gupta, I have heard so many stories from our audience members who say their nights are defined by a strange clockwork-like frustration where they fall asleep relatively easily, but then find themselves bolt upright at 2 or 3 a.m. with their minds racing and a heavy sense of dread. It is as if there is a silent alarm going off in their bodies that they never set, and no matter how much they try to relax, their heart feels like it is fluttering or running just a bit too fast for a person in a dark room. This middle-of-the-night wakefulness seems to be one of the most isolating experiences for those over 60 because the world is so quiet, yet their internal world is so loud and chaotic. Why does the heart refuse to settle down even when the body is exhausted? And is there a specific way we can position ourselves or breathe to signal to our nervous system that the day is truly over and it is safe to return to sleep?
You have perfectly described what I call the high alert shadow that follows many of us into the bedroom, Jane, and it reminds me so vividly of a patient I worked with named Robert Miller, though everyone called him Bob, a 68-year-old retired architect living in Phoenix, Arizona. Bob came to me because he was living in a state of constant exhaustion. He would go to bed at 10, but like clockwork, at 2:15 a.m., his eyes would snap open and he could feel his pulse thumping in his neck as his mind immediately started auditing his life's worries. He had tried every luxury mattress and darkened his room completely, but his internal thermostat was stuck in a state of hypervigilance because he hadn't taught his body how to dump the heat of the day's stress before lying down. I told Bob that his heart was essentially still on the treadmill because his sympathetic nervous system was refusing to hand over the reins to the parasympathetic side, and this often happens when we carry the physical tension of our posture into our sleep. For someone like Bob, the solution started with a very specific ritual of lying flat on his back, placing one hand on his heart and the other on his belly, and practicing that 4-6 breathing rhythm we discussed, but doing it as a form of physiological meditation. By placing his hands there, he was providing a form of tactile feedback to his brain, a physical reassurance that his body was present and safe, which helped lower his nocturnal blood pressure and allowed his heart rate to finally dip into that restorative zone.
That image of Bob sitting in the dark in Phoenix, feeling his pulse in his neck, is something I think so many people can relate to, especially that feeling that the heart is still on a treadmill while the body is trying to rest. When you suggested he place his hands on his chest and belly while lying on his back, it sounds almost like a form of self-cradling or a way to physically anchor oneself to the bed when the mind wants to float away into anxiety. I wonder if this specific posture combined with the breathing actually changes the chemistry of the blood or the signals going to the brain in a way that a pill simply cannot. And if this ritual is something that takes weeks to master, or if someone could feel that heavy sinking sense of relief the very first night they try to connect with their own heartbeat in that way?
It is much faster than people think because you are working with the hardwiring of your own biology rather than waiting for a chemical to be metabolized by your liver. When Bob started doing this, he realized that for years he had been bracing his neck and shoulders even while lying down, which was sending a constant stream of danger signals to his brain. But the moment he focused on the rise and fall of his hands, he was interrupting that feedback loop of anxiety. Physiologically, when we slow our breath to that 6 cycle per minute rate, we are actually optimizing our baroreflex sensitivity, which is the body's natural mechanism for regulating blood pressure. And for an older heart like Bob's, this is like giving the organ a gentle, cooling bath. He told me after the third night that for the first time in a decade, when he woke up at 2 a.m., he didn't panic. He just put his hands back in position, started the 4-6 breath, and felt a wave of warmth spread from his chest to his limbs as he drifted back off within minutes. It wasn't just about the posture, it was about the intention of reclaiming his body from the thoughts that were trying to hijack his night. And that is a power every single person listening has within them, regardless of their age or how many years they have struggled with insomnia.
It sounds like Bob wasn't just changing his sleep, he was changing his relationship with the dark and learning to trust his body again after years of feeling like it was betraying him in the middle of the night. If we can treat that 2 a.m. wake-up call not as a failure but as an opportunity to practice this heart-cooling ritual, it seems like we could take all the teeth out of the monster of insomnia that scares so many seniors.
Precisely, Jane, because the stress of being awake is often more damaging than the wakefulness itself. I told Bob to look at those quiet minutes as a gift, a time to check in with his heart and say, "We are okay." And by the time he reached his follow-up appointment, his daytime blood pressure had even begun to stabilize because he was no longer carrying the residue of a panicked night into his morning coffee. We often forget that the heart is a muscular pump that responds to the rhythm of our thoughts and our breath. And when we give it a slow, steady beat to follow through our intentional exhales, it has no choice but to follow suit and lead us back into the deep, dreamless sleep we so desperately need.
There is a common habit among people as they get older, Dr. Gupta, where they start heading to bed earlier and earlier, sometimes at 8 or 9 p.m., thinking that if they just spend more hours in bed, they are bound to catch at least a few hours of sleep. They linger there, reading or watching the news or just tossing and turning, believing that rest is happening even if sleep isn't. But I have heard you suggest that this might actually be a dangerous trap that backfires on our psychology. It seems almost counterintuitive to stay out of bed when you are tired, but you talk about this idea of the brain learning to be anxious in the bedroom, and for a generation that was taught to just keep trying, this is a very difficult habit to break. How do we know when we are accidentally training our brains to associate our pillows with stress instead of slumber? And what is the 60-second ritual that can reset that connection before we fall into a permanent cycle of bedroom dread?
This is one of the most significant psychological hurdles in sleep medicine, Jane, and I see it constantly where well-meaning people are inadvertently creating a conditioned reflex of insomnia. If you spend 3 hours in bed every night wide awake and worrying about your health or your finances, your brain eventually begins to identify the bed as a place of work and survival rather than a sanctuary for recovery. It is a biological phenomenon called stimulus control, where the environment dictates your physiological state. So if your bed equals worry, your brain will release cortisol the moment your head hits the pillow, even if you were exhausted on the couch just minutes before. I tell my patients that if they haven't fallen asleep within 20 minutes, they should actually get out of bed and do something quiet in dim light. But the real preventative measure happens in that 60 seconds of re-entry when you decide to go back to bed. Instead of trying to sleep, which is an active, stressful verb, you must focus on allowing rest to happen by using the breathing techniques we've discussed to lower the threshold of arousal. By using the 4-6 breath, inhaling for 4 and exhaling for 6, you are sending a clear, non-negotiable signal to the amygdala, the brain's fear center, that the environment is safe, effectively overriding the anxiety of the previous hours and teaching the brain that the bed is a place where the body effortlessly downshifts into a state of peace.
It is quite a revelation to think that we might be the ones teaching our brains to be afraid of our own beds, especially when all we want is a bit of peace. For those who have already fallen into this trap, who feel that spike of adrenaline the moment they see their bedroom door, it feels like a mountain to climb to change that association. You mentioned this 60-second ritual of breathing, But for someone who has felt this bedroom dread for years, is it really possible to rewire that neural pathway just by changing how they breathe and how they perceive their time in bed? It sounds so simple, yet the fear of a sleepless night is so incredibly powerful for someone in their 70s who knows how much an exhausted morning will cost them.
It is possible because the nervous system is remarkably plastic, even in our 80s, and it responds to consistent physical signals more than it does to our frantic thoughts. The reason the breathing works is that it bypasses the thinking part of the brain and speaks directly to the autonomic system, which is where the fear of the bed actually lives. When you lie down and immediately engage in that slow exhale, you are providing a physiological counter-argument to the brain's anxiety. You are literally forcing the heart rate to slow and the muscles to relax, which makes it impossible for the brain to maintain a high-stress state for very long. I often suggest that people combine this with a tiny gratitude anchor, thinking of one small, pleasant thing from the day, because this shifts the brain's chemistry from the pursuit of a goal, which is sleep, to the enjoyment of a state, which is comfort. We have to stop policing our sleep and start hosting it, welcoming it back like an old friend by making the environment and our internal state as inviting as possible. If you do this consistently for just a few nights, the brain begins to recognize that the bed is no longer a battleground but a place of physical ease, and that old reflex of dread begins to wither away because it is no longer being fed by the adrenaline of trying too hard.
Hosting sleep instead of policing it, that is a beautiful shift in perspective that I think could take a lot of pressure off of people who feel they are failing at sleeping. It's about creating an internal environment where sleep feels safe to arrive rather than trying to chase it down with a net made of anxiety and long hours in the dark.
Exactly, Jane, and that is why I emphasize the 60-second window so much. It is about that initial transition. If you can win those first 60 seconds by calming your breath and softening your posture, you have set the stage for the rest of the night. Sleep is not something you do. It is something that happens to you when you finally stop getting in your own way. And for the aging brain, which can sometimes be a bit more rigid in its habits, these physical off switches, like the 4-6 breath, are the most effective tools we have to reclaim the night. We must remember that our bodies want to sleep, they are programmed for it, and often our only job is to provide the quiet, rhythmic signal that says, the coast is clear, allowing the natural cycle of rest to take over and do its restorative work.
Dr. Gupta, there is a physical discomfort that many people over 60 deal with that has nothing to do with their thoughts and everything to do with their digestion, that persistent burning sensation of acid reflux. I've spoken to so many people who feel like they are doing everything right. They eat early and avoid spicy foods, but the moment they lie down, the fire starts in their chest and they end up propped up on 4 or 5 pillows, sleeping almost sitting up, which then leads to terrible neck and back pain the next morning. It seems like such a cruel trade-off, and they often feel like this is just a permanent part of aging that they have to endure with a bottle of antacids on the nightstand. Is there a way that something as simple as the side we choose to sleep on can actually solve a problem that feels so internal and chemical? And why does the body react so differently to lying on the left versus the right or flat on the back?
This is a classic example of how simple physics can solve a medical problem, and I often think of a patient named Linda Carter, a 74-year-old grandmother from Tampa, Florida, who came to see me because her night fire, as she called it, was ruining her life. Linda was sleeping propped up on a mountain of pillows, which left her with chronic neck stiffness. Yet every time she tried to lie flat to ease her back, the acid would wash back into her esophagus, causing her to wake up coughing and gasping in the middle of the night. She was convinced she needed surgery or stronger medication, but I asked her a very simple question. Which side do you usually roll onto when you try to sleep? It turns out she was a habitual right-side sleeper, and when I explained the anatomy of the stomach to her, she was shocked to realize she had been using gravity against herself for decades. The stomach is shaped like a curved flask, and its connection to the esophagus is located on the right side, so when you lie on your right, the stomach acid sits right at the doorway of the esophagus, making it incredibly easy for it to leak through. But when you roll onto your left side, the stomach sits lower than the entry point, creating a natural trap where the acid stays down due to simple gravity, significantly reducing the chance of that burning sensation reaching your throat.
It's almost hard to believe that such a debilitating problem for someone like Linda in Tampa could be addressed just by understanding the flask shape of our internal organs and choosing the left side. I can imagine Linda's surprise when something so mechanical provided relief after years of chemical interventions and uncomfortable upright sleeping. But for many seniors, staying on one side all night is a challenge because they naturally want to roll over or their hips start to ache. So how do we encourage the body to stay in that left side safe zone? And does this position offer other benefits for the aging body beyond just keeping the stomach acid where it belongs?
You're absolutely right, Jane. Staying in one position is tough. But for Linda, the transition was life-changing because once the burning stopped, her sleep became so much deeper that she didn't feel the urge to toss and turn as much. Beyond just reflux, lying on the left side is also thought to be beneficial for lymphatic drainage and can even help the heart pump more efficiently because the aorta, our body's largest artery, curves to the left. So gravity helps the blood flow along that path. I told Linda to use a long body pillow or even just a rolled up blanket behind her back to act as a gentle barrier that would prevent her from accidentally rolling onto her right side in her sleep. After just 1 week of consistent left side sleeping, she told me the night fire was gone, and because she was no longer propped up on 5 pillows, her morning neck pain vanished as well. It's a powerful reminder that as we age, we have to become more strategic with how we use gravity. We can't just crash into bed like we did at 20. We have to understand the architecture of our bodies and position ourselves in a way that supports our organs rather than straining them. And for anyone with reflux, the left side is truly the golden side of sleep.
It's wonderful to hear that Linda found such a simple path to relief. And it makes me think about how many people are suffering needlessly because they simply haven't been told about this left side secret. It turns what feels like a complex medical issue into a simple matter of positioning, which is so empowering for someone who feels like they've lost control over their health.
Empowerment is exactly the word, Jane. When I saw Linda again, she looked 10 years younger because she was finally getting that uninterrupted high-quality rest that only comes when the body isn't fighting itself. She wasn't waking up at 3 a.m. to swallow more tablets. She was waking up at 7 a.m. feeling refreshed and mobile. For the 60-plus population, these small adjustments, knowing which side to lie on, how to use a pillow to stay there, are the real fountain of youth because they allow the body's natural healing processes to work without interference. It's about being a student of your own body and realizing that sometimes the best medicine isn't in the pharmacy. It's in how you orient yourself to the world while you dream.
Dr. Gupta, there is this almost universal idea that as we get older and our joints start to ache, we deserve the softest, most cloud-like mattress we can find, something we can just sink into and forget the world. Many people spend thousands of dollars on these incredibly plush memory foam beds, thinking they are finally giving their backs a break, but then they wake up feeling like they've been in a car wreck with a stiff lower back and hips that don't want to move. It is so confusing for a senior who thinks they are investing in their comfort only to find that their expensive soft bed is actually making their pain worse. Why is that sinking feeling so deceptive for the aging spine? And what can we learn from the traditional Japanese approach to sleeping on firmer surfaces that might actually save our backs and help us wake up feeling more limber?
It is one of the most common misconceptions I encounter, Jane, and I often use the example of a patient named Patricia Nguyen, or Pat as she liked to be called, a 66-year-old former teacher from San Jose, California. Pat had spent a small fortune on a top-of-the-line ultra-soft mattress because she suffered from chronic lower back pain and morning stiffness, believing that a softer surface would cradle her aching joints. But when I spoke with her, she described her nights as a constant struggle to just turn over. She felt like she was trapped in quicksand, and because her spine was bowing into the soft foam all night, her muscles never actually got to relax because they were constantly working to try and stabilize her skeleton. The traditional Japanese wisdom of sleeping on a futon or a firmer surface is based on the idea of active support, where the bed provides a stable base that keeps the spine in a neutral, natural alignment rather than letting it sag like a hammock. When your spine sags, it puts immense pressure on the intervertebral discs and the ligaments, which is exactly why Pat was waking up feeling like she had been locked into a bad position for 8 hours straight.
The idea of being trapped in quicksand in your own bed is such a vivid and painful image. And I think Pat's experience in San Jose is something thousands of people go through without realizing the mattress is the culprit. It seems so counterintuitive to think that a firmer surface would be more comfortable for someone with stiff joints, but you're saying that the active support actually allows the muscles to stop working and finally let go. If someone isn't ready to go out and buy a Japanese futon or a brand new hard mattress, is there a way to test this theory at home, or a way to adjust their current soft bed to provide that necessary spinal alignment without it feeling like they are sleeping on a concrete floor?
I told Pat to try a very simple experiment before she gave up on her expensive bed. I suggested she try sleeping on a firm yoga mat or a thin mattress topper placed directly on a carpeted floor for just a 30-minute nap, or to place a piece of plywood under her current mattress to kill that hammock effect. What people like Pat discover is that when the surface is firmer, their body weight is distributed more evenly across their bones rather than concentrating pressure on the soft tissues of the lower back. For Pat, the change was almost immediate. Once she moved to a medium firm setup, she realized she could roll over with ease, and that simple ability to shift positions without straining allowed her joints to stay lubricated and unlocked throughout the night. It's important to clarify that we aren't suggesting people sleep on a literal rock, but the sweet spot for most seniors is a surface that feels solid but has just enough give to accommodate the curve of the hips and shoulders. Once Pat made the switch, she told me that the morning groans she used to make while getting out of bed simply disappeared because her spine hadn't been under tension for the previous 8 hours.
It's amazing how we can be tricked by comfort, isn't it? We think soft equals kind, but for the aging spine, firm is actually the kinder choice. It sounds like Pat's journey from that expensive quicksand bed to a more supportive, firm surface is a lesson in listening to the skeleton rather than the skin's immediate desire for fluffiness.
Exactly, Jane. The skeleton needs a foundation, not a hug. When we provide that firm foundation, we are respecting the natural architecture of the human body, which has evolved over millions of years to rest on relatively stable surfaces. By the time Pat came back for her follow-up, she was walking with a much more upright posture and had even started her morning walks again because she wasn't spending the first 2 hours of her day just trying to uncurl from her bed. For anyone over 60, I always say, if your bed feels like a cloud, you might be heading for a storm in your lower back. Look for that medium firm support that keeps your ears, shoulders, and hips in a straight line, and you'll find that getting out of bed becomes a moment of energy rather than a feat of endurance.
Dr. Gupta, there is a symptom of aging that we often laugh about or just dismiss as grandfather's snoring, but I have seen it become a real source of concern for families when that snoring is accompanied by a noticeable decline in memory or a strange fog that seems to hang over a person all day. Many people think I'm just getting older and my brain is slowing down, but they don't realize that the way they are positioned in bed, specifically lying flat on their back, might be literally starving their brain of oxygen for hours every night. It's a frightening thought that our sleeping posture could be a direct contributor to cognitive decline, yet it is something we almost never talk about in the context of brain health. How does lying on one's back, or the supine position as you call it, create this perfect storm for snoring and memory loss? And is there a way to reposition the body to keep the airway open and the mind sharp?
You are touching on a very serious and underdiagnosed issue called positional obstructive sleep apnea, and it brings to mind a patient named James Rodriguez, or Jim, an 81-year-old from San Antonio, Texas. Jim was a vibrant man, but his wife noticed he was snoring more loudly than ever, and more disturbingly, he was starting to forget simple things like where he parked the car or the names of longtime neighbors. When I evaluated Jim, I realized he was a dedicated back sleeper, and in that position, gravity causes the tongue and the soft tissues of the throat to collapse backward, partially blocking the airway. Every time Jim snored or stopped breathing for a few seconds, his blood oxygen levels would drop and his brain would experience a tiny micro-arousal to keep him from suffocating. This meant he never reached the deep restorative stages of sleep where the brain actually cleans itself, and that chronic oxygen deprivation was manifesting as brain fog and memory lapses that looked like early dementia but were actually just a result of his sleeping position.
It is heartbreaking to think of Jim in San Antonio being so close to a diagnosis of memory loss when the culprit was simply the position of his tongue and throat while he slept on his back. I think many families would be shocked to know that just snoring could be so damaging to the brain's ability to function during the day. If someone like Jim has spent 80 years sleeping on his back, it must feel impossible to change that habit, and yet the stakes, his very memory, are so high. What was the solution for Jim, and how did changing his posture from flat on his back to something else actually impact his clarity of mind and his ability to be present with his family?
The transformation was remarkable because we didn't just give him a pill, we gave him a new way to orient himself in space. I introduced Jim to what I call the diagonal or supported side-lying position, which uses a specific arrangement of pillows to keep the body tilted so that gravity works to keep the airway open rather than closed. We even used the old tennis ball trick, sewing a ball into the back of his pajama top to gently remind him to roll back onto his side whenever he tried to flip onto his back in the middle of the night. Within just 2 weeks of avoiding the supine position, Jim's wife reported that his snoring had decreased by 70%, but more importantly, Jim felt like a shutter had been opened in his mind. He was waking up with energy, his short-term memory started to sharpen again, and that heavy cloud of daytime sleepiness vanished because his brain was finally getting the oxygen and the deep, cleaning sleep it required. It's a powerful lesson for all of us. Your brain is only as healthy as your sleep, and your sleep is often a product of your posture.
It sounds like Jim's story is a wake-up call for anyone who thinks snoring is just an annoying sound. It's actually a cry for help from the brain. By simply moving off his back, Jim was able to reclaim his cognitive health and his life in a way that truly feels like a miracle, although it's really just good physiology.
It really is, Jane. When you lie on your side, you are ensuring that the pipe stays open, allowing a steady stream of life-giving oxygen to reach the most delicate tissues of your brain. For seniors over 60, I cannot emphasize this enough. If you are a back sleeper and you feel tired or forgetful, try the side switch immediately. It is one of the most effective, zero-cost interventions for protecting your brain as you age. Jim's Miracle in San Antonio is available to anyone willing to adjust their pillows and commit to a new way of lying down. We have to remember that we aren't just resting our bodies at night, we are refueling our minds, and we have to make sure the fuel line isn't being pinched shut by our own anatomy.
Dr. Gupta, you recently mentioned something that sounds like science fiction, but is actually a breakthrough in neurobiology, this idea of a trash-clearing system in our brains that only works while we sleep. It's called the glymphatic system, and as I understand it, it's like a night crew that comes in to wash away the metabolic waste and toxins that build up during the day, including things like amyloid beta, which is linked to Alzheimer's. This is such a vital piece of the puzzle for those of us over 60 who are worried about keeping our minds sharp for the long haul. But what is truly mind-blowing is the suggestion that the physical position of our head and neck could actually make this cleaning system more or less efficient. Could you explain how this brainwashing process works and why science is now suggesting that lying on our side might be like opening the drain for these toxins compared to other positions?
It is one of the most exciting areas of brain research right now, Jane, because it gives us a physical handle on how to prevent cognitive decline. Think of the glymphatic system as a series of tiny tunnels that open up between our brain cells only during deep sleep, allowing cerebrospinal fluid to rush through and flush out the day's debris. Now, what's fascinating is that research, including some very compelling animal studies that we believe translate to human physiology, shows that this fluid transport is most efficient when we are in a lateral or side sleeping position. When we lie on our side, it seems to optimize the pressure gradients and the flow of this cleaning fluid through the brain's complex architecture, making it easier for the trash to be moved out into the body's general waste system. If you sleep in a way that restricts this flow, perhaps by sleeping on your stomach with your neck twisted or by having your head at an awkward angle, you might be inadvertently slowing down that vital nightly rinse, which leaves you feeling heavy-headed or foggy when you wake up.
The idea that we could be clogging our own brain's cleaning system just by how we position our heads on a pillow is both a bit scary and incredibly empowering. It makes me think of all those mornings when I've woken up feeling thick in the head, wondering if it was just the coffee I needed, when it might have been that my brain's night crew couldn't get their work done. For our listeners who are deeply concerned about Alzheimer's and dementia, this side sleeping recommendation feels like a very practical brain insurance policy they can start tonight. How do we ensure that our neck and head are positioned to open the drain? And is there a specific way to use our pillows to make sure we aren't accidentally kinking the hose of this glymphatic flow while we sleep?
That kinking the hose metaphor is perfect, Jane, because that is exactly what happens when the neck is poorly supported. To truly support the glymphatic system, your head needs to be in a neutral position where the spine is straight from the base of your skull all the way down to your tailbone. If your pillow is too high or too low, you are creating a bottleneck at the very point where the fluid needs to exit the brain and enter the spinal canal. I tell my patients to imagine a straight line running through their nose and down their chest. If that line is bent, the drain is partially closed. By using a pillow that fills the gap between your ear and your shoulder while you are on your side, you create the most open pathway for that cerebrospinal fluid to do its work. Many of my colleagues and I are convinced that for the 60-plus population, this isn't just about comfort. It's about long-term neurological hygiene. It's about making sure that every single night you are giving your brain the best possible chance to reset and repair itself so that you wake up with a mind that feels light, clear, and ready for the day.
It's a powerful shift to think of sleep not just as resting, but as rinsing. If we can encourage our listeners to view their side sleeping as a deliberate act of brain cleaning, it takes the conversation about posture to a whole new level of importance. It's not just about a sore neck anymore. It's about the very clarity of our thoughts and the preservation of our memories as we age.
Precisely, and the beauty of it is that it costs nothing but a little bit of mindfulness. When you settle onto your side tonight and adjust your pillow to keep your neck straight, I want you to visualize that gentle rinse happening inside your skull, clearing away the fog and protecting your future self. We spend so much money on brain games and supplements, but the most effective smart drug we have is simply a well-positioned night of deep sleep. For the aging brain, which is naturally a bit more susceptible to the accumulation of these proteins, this lateral drainage is perhaps one of the most important habits you can ever develop. It's a way of being kind to your brain in the most fundamental way possible, ensuring that the engine stays clean so it can keep running smoothly for decades to come.
Dr. Gupta, we have talked a lot about the big concepts, the brain, the heart, the digestion. Yung doi ki for someone who is 70 or 80, the biggest obstacle to a good day is just the simple grinding pain of stiff joints the moment they try to get out of bed. They feel like they've been frozen in place all night, and it takes an hour of stretching and hot showers just to feel human again. You've mentioned that the solution isn't always a new mattress, but rather how we use something as simple as a few small pillows to proclaim a neutral territory for our joints. It seems so basic, yet many people are still just using one big pillow under their head and nothing else, leaving their hips and knees to fend for themselves in the dark. How can a few strategic pillows act like a lubricant for our joints? And what was the specific go-away ritual that helped your patient Pat find her mobility again?
It's the small things that often provide the biggest relief, Jane, and I go back to Patricia Nguyen, or Pat, in San Jose, who we talked about earlier regarding her soft mattress. Once we got her spine on a firmer surface, we still had to deal with her morning crunch, which was the stiffness in her hips and lower back. I realized that when she slept on her side, her top leg was falling over her bottom leg, which was twisting her pelvis and putting a constant 8-hour strain on her hip joints and her lower spine. I gave her a very simple instruction. Pat, I want you to take a small, firm pillow and place it between your knees when you are on your side. And if you ever roll onto your back, I want you to put that pillow under your hamstrings, just behind the knees. You know, this sounds like a minor detail, but by placing that pillow between her knees, we were keeping her hips stacked in a neutral line, which prevented that pelvic twist and allowed the muscles around her joints to finally let go of their tension.
It's fascinating that something as simple as a pillow between the knees could be the difference between waking up in pain and waking up lubricated, as Pat described it. I think many of us feel like we're helping ourselves by using more pillows under our heads, but you're saying we should be distributing that support down to our limbs. For someone like Pat, who was so used to that morning crunch, did she feel the difference immediately? And is there a type of pillow, soft or firm, that works best for this kind of joint support? Or can we just use whatever is lying around the house?
Pat was skeptical at first, but after the very first night, she told me she woke up and realized she didn't have to gear herself up to stand up. She just stood. By keeping her joints in that neutral zone, she was preventing the inflammation that happens when a joint is held at an awkward angle for hours. As for the pillow, I usually recommend something relatively firm, like a contour pillow or even a rolled-up towel, because you want it to maintain its shape under the weight of your leg. If it's too soft, it just flattens out and you lose that stacking benefit. I also told her to use a very thin pillow under her head so her neck wouldn't be pushed too high, because the goal is a perfectly straight line from the crown of the head to the tailbone. When Pat started sandwiching her joints with these small supports, she said it felt like she was being cradled by the bed rather than fighting it, and that sense of physical security allowed her nervous system to drop into a much deeper level of repair.
It sounds like we should be thinking of pillows not as headrests, but as body spacers that keep everything in its proper place while we aren't awake to monitor our posture. It's a very practical, low-cost way to treat age-related stiffness as a mechanical issue that can be solved with a little bit of geometry.
Exactly, Jane. It's biomechanical architecture. We have to remember that our joints are like hinges, and if you leave a hinge half open and under pressure for 8 hours, it's going to be stiff when you try to move it in the morning. By using these spacers, we are keeping the hinges in their most relaxed, neutral state. For anyone listening who wakes up with that heavy or stiff feeling in their lower back or hips, please try the knee pillow trick tonight. It is one of the most effective ways to oil your joints while you sleep. Pat eventually told me she felt like she had gotten her legs back, and it all started with 2 small pillows and a bit of intentional positioning. We don't have to accept stiffness as an inevitable part of being over 60. We just have to learn how to support our frame while we rest.
Dr. Gupta, we've covered so much today, from the way the brain rinses itself to the physics of acid reflux and the quicksand of soft mattresses. But I think for many of our listeners, the most overwhelming part is trying to remember it all when they are already tired and just want to go to bed. There is a lot of pressure these days to have the perfect sleep routine with the right lights, the right temperature, and now the right posture. And that pressure can itself become a cause of insomnia. You've often said that we shouldn't be hunting for a perfect night, but rather building a ritual that our bodies can recognize and follow without us having to think too hard. If you had to distill all of this into a simple, gold standard routine for someone over 60 who just wants to feel better tomorrow morning, how would you help them prioritize these changes so they don't feel like they are studying for a medical exam every time they walk into their bedroom?
That is the most important question of all, Jane, because stressing about sleep is the ultimate sleep killer. I want everyone to breathe a sigh of relief and realize that you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be consistent enough to let your biology take over. If I had to give 3 golden rules for the 60-plus years, they would be these. First, master the 60-second downshift using the 4-6 breath, inhaling for 4, exhaling for 6, because that is the master key that opens the door to the parasympathetic nervous system. Second, choose your side of safety. If you have reflux, that is the left side. If you snore or have memory concerns, it is either side, but definitely stay off your back. And third, use strategic support by placing a pillow between your knees or under your legs to keep your spine in that neutral, happy line. Don't try to change everything tonight. Just pick the one that addresses your biggest pain point, whether it's the burning in your chest or the stiffness in your back, and make that your new anchor ritual.
It's so helpful to hear you say that we don't have to do it all at once, and that consistency is more important than perfection. For many of us, the idea of a ritual feels much more welcoming than a regimen. It sounds like something we do for ourselves as an act of kindness rather than a chore. But I wonder, for the person who has been struggling for 20 years, who feels like it's too late to change, how do you give them the hope that these small physical rituals can actually overcome decades of bad sleep? Is the body really that forgiving at 75 or 85? And can we really unlearn the exhaustion that has become our daily companion?
The body is incredibly forgiving, Jane, and it is never ever too late to provide it with better conditions for healing. I have seen people in their late 80s transform their energy levels in a matter of weeks just by changing their sleeping posture and their breathing patterns. It's like a garden that has been neglected. The moment you start providing the right water and the right light, the plants begin to revive, even if they've been dormant for years. These rituals are simply the way we water our nervous system and provide the light of oxygen and spinal alignment to our cells. When you build a ritual, you are taking the work out of sleeping and letting it become a natural rhythmic transition again, just like it was when we were children. We have to stop looking at ourselves as broken and start seeing ourselves as misaligned. And these 3 golden rules are the tools we use to bring ourselves back into that healthy alignment.
Misaligned, not broken. That is such a hopeful way to end our look at the science of sleep. It takes away the blame and replaces it with a simple physical path forward. If we can just commit to those 60 seconds of breathing and one strategic pillow, we are already on our way to a lighter brain and a softer morning.
Exactly, Jane. Sleep is the foundation of everything we do, and at this stage of our lives, it is the most important investment we can make in our future health and happiness. Don't hunt for it, just invite it. Build your ritual, breathe through your exhales, and trust that your body still knows exactly what to do once you get out of its way. By the time you wake up tomorrow, you won't just be a day older, you'll be a night more restored, and that is a beautiful way to live.
Dr. Gupta, as we wrap up this incredible conversation, I am struck by something you said earlier about how, for many seniors, the night can feel like the loneliest time, a time when the house is quiet but the worries are loud. We have spent this hour talking about the how-to of sleep, the mechanics and the science, but I think it is equally important to talk about the why. You've suggested that sleep shouldn't be seen as just collapsing at the end of a long day, but as a way of returning home to ourselves, of being hospitable to our own aging bodies. This is such a compassionate way to look at the process of getting older. As a final thought for our listeners who might be heading to bed soon, what is the core message you want them to carry into the dark tonight? How can they transform that lonely midnight hour into a time of deep internal connection and healing?
My deepest hope, Jane, is that everyone listening realizes that sleep is the most profound act of self-care you can perform. It is the time when your body loves you back by repairing your cells, clearing your mind, and calming your heart. I want you to stop seeing your bed as a place where you disappear and start seeing it as a sanctuary where you are choosing to heal. Tonight, as you lie down, don't just guksung or collapse from exhaustion. Instead, intentionally trove nya or return home to your own body. Take those 60 seconds to breathe, feel the support of your pillows, and acknowledge that you are doing something vital for your health. My 3 final golden reminders for you are these. First, let your breath be your anchor, 4 seconds in, 6 seconds out, to tell your heart it is time to rest. Second, listen to your organs, roll onto your left if your stomach is restless, or stay on your side to keep your brain's drain open and your mind clear. And third, respect your frame. Use those small pillows to support your joints so that tomorrow's movement is a joy rather than a chore. If you do these things, you aren't just sleeping, you are cultivating a better version of yourself for the morning.
Cultivating a better version of yourself. What a lovely thought to fall asleep to. It turns the act of lying down into a purposeful, almost sacred ritual of renewal. Dr. Gupta, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for sharing your expertise, your stories of patients like Bob, Linda, Jim, and Pat, and your deep compassion for the aging journey. You have given us more than just medical advice. You have given us a new way to inhabit our nights and a reason to look forward to waking up.
It has been a true honor, Jane. If there is one thing I've learned from the thousands of patients I've seen, it's that the human spirit is incredibly resilient when the body is given the rest it needs. To everyone listening, thank you for inviting me into your world tonight. Remember, your body is a remarkable instrument, and even after 60, 70, or 80 years, it still wants to find its way back to harmony. Be patient with yourself, be kind to your joints, and trust the rhythm of your breath. I wish you all a night of deep, restorative peace and a morning filled with clarity and light. Thank you for having me, and sleep well.
And thank you, our listeners, for joining us on this journey to healthy kidneys after 60 and a healthier, more rested you. We hope these Japanese-inspired secrets and Dr. Gupta's clinical wisdom help you reclaim your nights and transform your mornings. If you found this episode helpful, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you never miss a deep dive into the health topics that matter most to you. We have so many more conversations planned to help you live your most vibrant life after 60. Until next time, I'm Jane Pauley. Tonight, breathe slow, position yourself with care, and we will see you in the next podcast. Good night, everyone.